And here we are. All right, so we are now recording, I think. Yes, we are. So if anybody feels like Zoom bombing, this is the time to do it. I hope everyone is safe wherever in the world you are. This is unfortunately the way we all have to meet now. It's forever, I think. And thanks for everyone for showing up. I'll kick it off by just saying, you know, this is a pretty exciting thing. You know, Ben and I had this conversation back, what was it, January, Ben? And this is, I think as a journey goes, there's just a lot of teams out here doing cool stuff with Kubernetes. So I think it's time for this to be like a formal part of the project. And I think that's a good idea. The goals that I had stated in the meeting, just to kind of put a structure around it, and I'll stop talking after I say this, just so we can get any kind of input we need. But I just want to make sure if we know the teams that are going to want to work on this, because I'm assuming, I know there are teams out there, but I want to just know, like, write down who's working on it, maybe get some contact information. Do a discussion basically on the framework for how do people participate, like that framework, and then just try to get some early goals, like what do we want to try to do. So I'll stop there. If there's anything else that you think should be on the table in this mere 30 minutes. Nate, I'll defer.
No, I think that sounds pretty good, man.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's start this off right. I know I'm going to just call off the people I know already. Ben, I'm going to count you in here. Instacluster is in.
we sorry. I've got two noisy, amazing children in the background. So let me just find a spot where it's easier for me to think clearly.
That's right. And I'm just going to say, yeah, data stacks too. Okay. Who else do we have here? Do we have people from other companies or people working on a Cassandra operator right now? Just go ahead and unmute and speak up.
Hey, I'm here as well. This is Stefan. I'm from Instacluster too.
Okay, great. And you don't have kids, so you can.
No,
yeah.
No.
That's great. Anyone else? What other groups do we have represented today?
My name is Isaac. I work at Bloomberg on the Cassandra team, and we've done a little bit of work with the Instacluster operator.
Okay.
Have forked it.
Oh yes, you forked it, huh? All right.
Well, forked it and contribute some things back.
Okay. Okay. PR is accepted.
I'm Mohammed, also from Bloomberg, with Isaac and the Cassandra team.
Oh, great. Anybody else from Bloomberg?
I think that's it.
Okay, great. And I'm assuming Bloomberg, you guys are running a lot of, are you running Cassandra on Kubernetes right now?
We have sandboxes. So like you could spin up a Cassandra to play around with in Kubernetes, but we aren't in production or anything like that yet.
Okay. All right.
And everything we do is on bare metal Kubernetes clusters. So there's no like cloud.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right.
You guys are this is Jeremy from DataStax. You guys are in the centralized Cassandra as a service sort of team. But
yeah.
I think I talked to you guys at the Next Generation Cassandra conference back in like 2017 or something like that.
Yeah, we were there in either 17 or 18. I can't remember.
17 or something like that, yeah.
Okay.
It's down in San Antonio.
All right. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Joshua Galbraith. So I'm here along with 4 other folks from New Relic. We're looking to either adopt or adapt one of the open source operators here in the next couple of months.
Oh, awesome. Great. Welcome. Anybody else from New Relic? You said there was somebody else there too?
Yeah, 4 of us total. So we got Tom Offerman, Dan Young, Adam Villalpando.
All right.
Hi.
Very cool. Okay. Anybody else? I think it's kind of hard to tell who I've gone through, but anybody who doesn't work for Instacluster, DataStax, Bloomberg, New Relic?
Hey, I'm Chris. I don't think I really know any of you besides the people I work with. I work at Apple with Nate and David Capel, who's also appears to be on the line. We currently do run a fair bit of Cassandra on top of Kubernetes in production right now. We don't have an operator. It's been something we've been looking into. We do have some cases where we use some custom resource definitions to achieve it, but yeah, very interested in this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah, very good. Well, there was that presentation at KubeCon in San Diego last year that had there was some discussion about Cassandra on Kubernetes there from an Apple employee.
Yeah, that was me.
Oh, okay, Chris. See, turn your camera on, man. I can't see you.
I think my camera's on.
It's hard to tell anymore.
My camera's on.
Okay. Maybe I just don't have a complete view. So just curious. So you gave that talk. Was that more of like you were experimenting with this, or what's your current state?
No, when we gave that talk, we had probably on the order of a couple hundred production Cassandra instances spread across a dozen or so clusters, and we've only been growing since then.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right. So this is, and thank you everyone for showing up. This is probably a little more, this is what I'm really not sure about. And Nate and Ben, especially Nate, from the project standpoint, this participation of like this framework of participation, I think we're going to have a lot of people that want to participate. And how's that going to happen? Is it another repo? I think this is the opening line.
It's best to do this type of thing as documentation where initially is like like a Cassandra improvement process type thing. So everybody can come and put some comments on it and input at leisure along in coordination with the issue that sort of points to the doc, I think is the best thing to do. Like similar to what we did with Sidecar. Have the issue, have the doc, discuss it, bring stuff to the mailing list if it needs to, but like it just needs to happen in public like that. And the more of these calls we can do to sort of get people on the same page, the better. There's nothing against that so long as we don't make decisions here and we take stuff back to the list type of thing.
Sure. And I am recording all of these, and I have no problem doing this like every couple of weeks or every week, whatever we feel like the pace needs to be. My Zoom account is cheap, but posting the recording up, I think, is helpful. Let me ask this too: is this time frame was supposed to be like West Coast U.S., Asia friendly? Is that true? Did I do a good job of that?
Yeah, it's new, local here, so.
Okay. There'll be another one of these tomorrow morning my time, 7 a.m. my time, but it is better for Central European time. So doing two of these was not ideal, I don't think, because that splits up the conversation. So I'm open to comments about whether or not that's a good idea or not.
I think it's the only way to get everybody in to be able to participate. And people who want to go to both probably should, because the people who have the most production experience that I've seen so far, and Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, is all the guys at Orange France.
Yep.
Because and the folks over there, because they've been working hard on this for like 2 or 3 years now, and they have their open source operator out there. So any of you all that are just starting to play with it, I would recommend going to that meeting as well, even though it's going to be early for Pacific time. Well, not so much for East Coast, but those folks over there know what they're doing.
Yeah, that's the CASCOP project, by the way.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so CEP, that sounds good. And does that mean just start with the Jira, or start with the CEP?
I guess both. I don't. I mean, there's not like a established way to do this so much, particularly when it's not clear if we're going to take this as like a donation from somebody, if we're going to like roll something new or what, but it's a good place to start, sort of get requirements down and who wants to do what and like what direction.
Ben, I was going to ask your opinion on this too, because you've had an operator out there for a while.
Yeah, so I think it might be worth maybe on these calls just kind of, I guess, at least getting a baseline understanding around what various people are kind of comfortable with in terms of which direction they want to head with the CEP. That way it means that we don't have to spend a whole bunch of time trying to boil the ocean in the CEP, being like, well, what do we do if we start from scratch? What if we do if it's a donation? And we kind of limit the possibilities to what's actually possible based on various organizations interest and that kind of thing. I think just making sure it's all happening there is obviously the right way to go. But having a well-defined starting point is going to make this a lot easier. It'll be really interesting to see what the folks from the CASCOP project have to say. I think they're probably the ones that are probably doing this in production the biggest and the baddest. We've certainly got a few smaller deployments with our operator in production, but it's nothing as what I would say is production what the over there have done. So yeah, I think for me is just getting a loose understanding of where everyone's appetites are at, and then we can kind of limit the CEP to 2 or 3 different options or different paths to take.
Well, we can call some folks out. I think somebody from Bloomberg, Isaac or Mohammed, if you want to start. Called out. Do you have a preference on how like where would you like to start with this? No preference, huh? All right. Consensus. This is how we do things, right?
I just realized I was on mute the entire time.
Oh, were you pontificating? Oh man, you caught me monologuing. All right, go ahead.
You never get used to this. I've been working remotely for forever. Yeah, so I think from my perspective, we should just figure out what do all these operators have in common. What is the feature set of each of them offered right now, and then what features are missing between them. But I think going for something that offers a baseline feature set of you can spin up a cluster and you can expand a cluster, you can shrink a cluster using this operator, I think is a good initial goal to have, instead of trying to say, oh, well, this will automate every single operation that we do currently.
Yeah, that sounds like a good starting place. Like I know that the operator doesn't have a ton of features it can do, but that's a good place to start. If we can do some deltas between, because I think a lot of them are the same, but there's probably some nuance that's pretty interesting. Dan or somebody else from New Relic? You all are on mute, right? We have to remind, if you're speaking, you're on mute. How about you, Tom? You were speaking up earlier.
Go ahead, Tom.
Sure. Yeah. I guess what I would say is, so we're New Relic. We're very early in the process. We've really haven't even begun to investigate sort of the operator options that are out there right now. So all of this activity is coming at a really good time. I think what we're most interested in, like I agree, is kind of starting with pretty basic functionality, and what we're most interested in is kind of working with and choosing the operator that the community is moving towards. One of our concerns was always like picking something. Picking a project that wasn't that may not have like a long-term future. So yeah, so the idea that there's sort of a momentum around a community solution is exactly what we're looking for. So we're hoping to support that.
Cool. Ben, I wouldn't mind like if you and I could take the lead on making that initial CEP. I don't want to volunteer you, but I really like the idea of this being a combined effort and not just a single effort. Oh, made him leave. Okay. Maybe that was a bad idea. Sorry, Ben. So when Ben shows up again, I'll tell him what I said. But do you all know where the CEPs exist? Is that kind of a foreign thing? Well, I'll tell you. There's a Cassandra wiki. It's in the same place where I spent the link for this meeting. There's a grand total of 1 CEP in there, and I think after this we should have 2. Thanks, Dan. So yeah, and it's not exclusive, but to get edit rights, which you'll need, you need to, someone needs to give them to you. But once you have the rights, you can give it to somebody else. So it's kind of a weird security model, but it would be, I think that it has a nice interface. It's easy to work with. It's not exactly Google Docs, but it's pretty close. Ben, sorry, I kind of volunteered you a little bit.
Oh, nice. My internet dropped out right at the best time for that to happen.
Yeah, I noted that. Yeah, it'll be on the recording. You can watch that. What I said, it would be, I think you and I, if we teamed up on like doing the initial outline for the CP, just as a matter of like, we're having more than one person write it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think that's I'm more than happy to do that. And yeah, no, I think that sounds like a good path forward.
I'll see if I can find somebody tomorrow in the next meeting as well. So if we can get like a quorum, that means so much different thing here. But yeah, if we can get a few.
One question I had for the broader team, because we've got a number of companies here that are in very much the development, sandbox, testing, wait and look stage of things. And that's been my primary experience with, we've been working on our operator and its various versions and implementations for a year or two now. And there's definitely been, a ton of interest in the space, but, I'd be really interested to hear what everyone's, I guess, kind of production when they're ready, looking to, genuinely start using.
I'll finish that thought. Poor Ben. He goes to the backyard and this happens to him. This is actually something he and I talked about. What are some of the criteria that you need to know or need to really feel to make this a production operator?
I think one big thing is being able to support either cross-region Kubernetes clusters or if you have multiple Kubernetes clusters on-prem and cross-data center. That's been one of the challenges that I don't think any of the operators yet tackled.
Cascop does that to some extent. They have a prototypical version. They had, so a year ago when I spoke with them, they had, that was kind of in planning stages, but I think late like August, September timeframe or something like that, I think they had an initial stab at that. John Sanda, do you know where they're at with that? I remember they had something going for that.
Yeah, so Sebastian was one of the lead on that, and I don't know if it's in production. I haven't kept up with them lately, but I mean, I know the stuff's been merged and it's they're ongoing. When I last talked with him about it, he's since left to go to Amazon, but before he left, it was all in their internal repos, and then shortly thereafter, so it was probably towards the end of last year, it was put in the public GitHub repo, and they put out a blog post about it. So they've definitely made a lot of progress since then. I'm not sure if they're using it in production yet, but I know that was a goal for at least, I want to say early this year. So I would guess that they probably are.
It's been interesting to see kind of the Kubernetes ecosystem mature with regards to multi-cluster, not multi-Kubernetes cluster deployments or cross-region deployments. And that's definitely one of the iterations there. I've seen a few solutions in this space from like Submariner, which does IPsec tunnels between regions. You could tier your cloud providers together or your on-prem to cloud and just hope that the networking works out, or even look at using something like a proxy layer, so integrating with something like Envoy to handle that within your Kubernetes space. And they all have different pros and cons. I'm curious what the shape of the community-led operator would kind of target, or would it be kind of malleable as to whether or not you go one way or the other?
I'm happy to take a stab at this. This is something that we have very purposely not implemented, despite multiple people asking for it and looking to tackle it. We've learned very quickly that trying to build on Kubernetes is like building on quicksand, especially when you're touching internal APIs and that kind of thing. And so we're very much held off trying to take a stab at multi-region Kubernetes until they had a solid community census around what that looks like at the control plane side of things. I know that doesn't help people who have a hard requirement to do this stuff sooner rather than later. But we've kind of left it to be, but kind of left some functionality off the end where it's like, as long as you've got TCP/IP connectivity, you can add in some extra config and it should work, but it hasn't been anything we've tried to tackle from having a sensible answer on the control plane side of things.
I talked to extensively with the Sky team, and hopefully they'll be on tomorrow at the next meeting. They are trying to make the multi data center, and it sounds like they're not only doing it from an operator standpoint, but they're also doing some bending on the Kubernetes side as well. I think the quote that I got was, Kubernetes wasn't quite ready for this. And like the networking layer was not okay with that. And so with gossip, etc. So I think that's another opportunity too, is how much, we may need to engage the Kubernetes community and for some things as well. And that'll be interesting. I'm also in the TOC for CNCF, and the software-defined networking SIG is heating up right now. Might be, they may want to get involved.
So are we presuming that this is going to be like a multi-control plane? Like I'm assuming that this is going to be, everybody has different, like a control plane per region, and then you're kind of unifying them, or are you thinking, what is the layout? Because the networking is the challenge, but I'm just wondering, because you have per region control plane types.
So what you see with the operator is one of the clusters is designated to be the control plane for holding the fact that there is the logical construct of the cluster, and then it pushes the data centers out to separate Kubernetes clusters. It might be interesting to take a look at what some of the service meshes are doing in this space, though, where they have, in some instances, they follow the same pattern where you have a single Kubernetes cluster that's like the control plane to the other Kubernetes clusters. But then in other deployments, there are HA solutions where you run that management layer across clusters and do elections and what have you, to make sure that you're highly available and outside of just a single region. So like, look at what Istio is doing that for their multi-cluster deployments as kind of a model. Obviously, not the same components that are inside of Istio, just the general idea of deployments in that shape.
And I guess where I'm going with that too is that like Orange and Sky are probably operating within their own data centers, so they have a little bit more control per data center of what versions and unifying the versions and things like that. So they could have a master version of like a master control plane or whatever. But when you get to, if you want to go multiple clouds where you have Kubernetes engines involved, are you going to say that each region is going to have access and sovereignty over its own resources, and like the GKE is going to operate and do the specific stuff in GKE, and then you have the AKS is going to operate its own stuff in there, and then have a master control plane that like what you're talking about. I'm just wondering if we can cover all the bases.
Well, Sky is multi-cloud. They're in Amazon and Google.
Okay. When I've worked with them before, it was mostly on-prem, but now they're okay. Cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think what it does highlight is, there is no strong answer from the Kubernetes community around this is the way you should do it. And, I think, we got to lean on them for what's the solution, because otherwise we're going to end up, going down a way that works for some and probably doesn't work for all. And it may also, we just need to have an acknowledgement that, as we work on this particular CEP, there'll be folks with production requirements that push them in a different direction, at least for the time being, until we can harmonize. It's hard when you're trying to build for everyone, right, versus just scratching your own itch. So I think, maybe starting to lean on the Kubernetes community, for the right answer, and try and skate to the puck a little bit if possible, or we just wait for a bit of maturity.
I do know that there are folks in the CNCF that are super interested. It has been mentioned, like, this is really a cool idea. Cassandra, there's not really much of a database solution stack in that world, and it's kind of a flat tire. It's like, okay, we need this, right? And there are some projects like Vitness and TIKB or TIDB, TikaDB, which is a key value store, and then of course etcd, but not like what Cassandra could do. So I will bet we could get some hands going.
And the timeline from the Kubernetes community, I think that we've been kind of looking at this to see how mature the components are right now. When you look at like Federation V1 and V2, and then what other cloud providers are doing with like Anthos for GCP and what have you. And it doesn't seem like it seems like the approach that Kubernetes has taken historically is, let's do what we can to make stateless apps behave really well and scale really well. And I think we can all agree that that's pretty easy. But the stateful applications have come kind of second tier, both with the components that make up stateful applications inside of Kubernetes now, like stateful sets and persistent volumes. And I'm curious to see what that timeframe is going to look like for doing something above just federation, which is, okay, I just want many copies of this in all these regions, because we have to do the plumbing between them so they can talk to each other. And that's the tricky part. I get wanting to be cautious and not go against the grain of what Kubernetes is planning, but I'd also like to have realistic timelines for what that looks like, because in some cases, I'm curious to see how lenient users are going to be to there not being a solution for this in place.
Yeah, I think these are all really good points. I'm just keeping the clock in mind. I did schedule this for half an hour just so that we didn't have to, we could probably talk about this for hours, but I think the time for that is coming near. I if there's any other pressing issues, of course, this is a good time. But I think the takeaway here is, and I'll feed this over to the next meeting as well, is Ben and I, and then hopefully somebody else will start a CEP. Start gathering comments, gathering requirements, start hashing it out in docs, as Nate put it. But super happy to see, a lot of participation already. Like, I'm glad to see it's not just, me and Ben, because I love Ben, but it's nice to see other folks involved. But yeah, so if there's anything else, I'll just leave the mic open.
As the CEP materializes, are you looking for comments on that or edits? Because I know there's been a reasonable amount of research into a number of operators and some of the challenges that we're going to encounter going into multi-cluster Kubernetes deployments, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the whole point, is to get everybody to get a single place where everybody can sort of converse and follow along. That isn't like an ever-growing Jira issue type of thing, because Jira just kind of falls down once you get past tons of comments.
Yeah, and really, I think, and putting some words into Patrick's mouth as well a little bit here, but we'll kick off the CEP, but I think really it'll be primarily around scaffolding and structuring the doc, getting it all planned out, what we're going to talk about, because otherwise you'll just have two vendors navel gazing at how amazing their own offerings are, which will be fun for me and Patrick, but not particularly useful for everyone else.
Yeah. Hey, I'm so bored right now, staying home all the time. I'm in for it. Let's do it. I haven't been to a conference in months, man. I'm freaking out.
So
all right.
I have a quick question, which I think has already been answered, but just ask anyway. So is the thinking going forward that this effort would be, and whatever project that might come about, would be done within or under the umbrella of the existing Cassandra project?
I mean, that's an excellent question. That would be one of the things I think we could come out as part of this, whether you want to take that as like a sub repo like we have with some of the other stuff, or like, but that lives somewhere else, just like that's exactly the type of thing I see to shake out of this, is like consensus on whether it should be there or somewhere else.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm more than happy to share my view on this, straight from day one. Is I think it's pretty clear from everyone attending and talking about this and what everyone's built that, this is wildly useful beyond what everyone's doing internally. I pretty strongly believe that this is something that should live under the project if we've got a broader appetite for it to be there. I'm kind of all in on that direction. Even as someone that, that would either mean, abandoning what we wrote or donating it or whatever ends up happening. I just see this as so broadly useful for the community that's the direction that I personally want to push this.
Just a related comment or question I've asked recently, there's a Cassandra Docker, so just from a container perspective that might kind of be related. There's a Docker image that the Docker folks are doing. Would managing and overseeing a Docker image, or maybe contributing to their Docker image, be of value for this whole conversation as well, to have something that is kind of a unified effort? Or people seemed reluctant on the dev channel to talk about maybe a Docker image that's sponsored by the project because we want to make sure that people maintain it, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it drives me nuts that we don't own that, but like at the same time, there's a bunch of people with different opinions than me on that, on like the PMC. So I personally don't like it, but there's some people who think it's a good idea, and I don't.
You personally don't like which?
The fact that we don't own that.
Okay. Because I mean,
yeah.
I can see that if we're going to go in the direction of having a project-sponsored Kubernetes operator, then potentially having something that it can test with in a kind of like a continuous testing environment or whatever having something standard that people can rely on that works with the operator might be handy. I don't know if there's that much coupling that needs to happen there, but I just thought that might be a helpful thing to have in conjunction with it.
So this brings up
I think that's a good point. Bringing it in tree or under project ownership also gives a little bit more credence than it being community driven from the Docker community. And then if there are any changes that need to happen to enable some of this functionality, like a sidecar, it'd be nice to know or to be able to publish images with the sidecar present and what have you, and actually have the backing of the project versus saying, oh, you install it from the Docker image that's out there, that's not ours. And I mean, obviously that's not the stance that the community would take, but it just makes it more difficult if it's not in tree and having kind of project involvement with it. Especially one of the things that's been frustrating for us is we want to work with 4.0 and the community Docker images don't have 4.0 at all. So it'd be nice as we get into like alphas and betas and release candidates to have the official image have those tags as well.
There's a whole other song and dance there about like we can't do RC candidates for like binary build systems like that because part of the voting process at Apache is that's the legal binding to identification by the Apache Software Foundation. And there's a couple different threads at the ASF public archives about like, and then the infra and legal issue systems that it's just, I mean, minutia. It's not easy to do with release candidates. They need to be releases because technically you're publishing a binary and you need to go through the whole process of ensuring that everyone's looked through to it to the best of their ability to make sure that all the licensed stuff is where it needs to be.
So I have a follow-up question. So if the operator project does live under a sub-project of Cassandra, would I don't know if it's the PMC members or the folks that are involved of doing, I don't know if oversight's the right word, but involved for voting for releases and whatnot, would those be the same folks that would be providing that same oversight for this sub-project?
Yes.
That's good to know.
Yeah. So that I think that's something to consider because there are two different, moving at two different speeds. Cassandra established and fair to say some inertia. These are young projects, and there's probably folks that are deeply involved in the Cassandra community that are not so involved with this, and just something worth considering.
And vice versa. I think we're going to get a lot of people that are going to be only want to work on the Kubernetes operator that are not Cassandra committers.
Yeah. There's precedent for this the ASF with projects like Beam, where you have tons and tons of submodules where people move independently on those submodules depending on like what is needed upstream from there. That's one of the first ones that come to mind. But like a couple projects in a Dupe ecosystem work that way as well. But there's ways to do this where there is a PMC, but like there's nothing stopping you from having like a weekly releases on an operator and just doing what we do on Cassandra proper.
So, this is more. Yeah, my questions are more about So oversight may not have been the best word because not in terms of how the project in terms of the community is involved. That's one thing. That's separate. I'm thinking more of the technical side. Like releases, approving PRs. I'm thinking that not so much.
Yeah, it would have to be the same people. But
in terms of releases, I think you're decoupling it so that it doesn't have to move at the same rate. You're not depending on like, okay, let's do 4.0, and until 4.0 ships, we can't do another version of the operator, but they're completely decoupled and versioned separately. Is that what you're thinking? Or I guess it depends on the functionality that's required, or are you saying that it's going to live in project and go out with each release?
No, I would put this in a different module if just
exactly. That's what I guess. Is that what you're asking, John? Is to say that it's decoupled so that you can have a different release cadence and that sort of thing?
Well, that's part of it. I think different release cadence, and I think that there are obviously intersecting concerns and interests here, obviously. But like Patrick said, you've got people coming at it from both ends of this. So on one end of the spectrum, you've got Cassandra committers and people like so. I'm at DataStax by way of TLP, who are just Cassandra gurus. And then you've got other people at the other end of the spectrum that are, see people working on their operators been, maybe a lot stronger on the Kubernetes side of things, and not as much in the Cassandra side. And so it's, I think sometimes, that's, I'm just thinking about that, how that will mesh if the same people that are going to decide whether or not, provide that, when I say oversight, for example, let's say decide about whether or not a PR should get merged into upstream for Cassandra, also would be the ones that making that call for the operator project.
Yeah, I mean, as part of this, I would anticipate taking on or quickly adding people who committers to and this is my personal opinion. I can't speak for anything here, but I would anticipate taking people on as committers on when we brought in something like a sophisticated module like this, and if somebody was focused on that, I'd be the type of thing where you have committer rights to that. And again, you do the same thing with Beam, where they'll bring in a plugin or a module, and you'll have a couple committers for that, and they're Beam committers, but that's where they hang out because that's what they know. And it's any kind of votes like that are lazy consensus. So even if one person votes +1 for release, you release it.
That's how it works. I think this is going to be an interesting structural conversation because, this is all in Go, and all the rest of the projects in Java. So, I mean, we have some impedance mismatches along the way. I was going to ask anybody from New Relic or Bloomberg. I mean, we're talking people who, we're a lot of vendors who have one, but that people who want to use one, do you have a preference of where it lives or how it lives?
Not really too much of a preference, as long as it's just easy to install, build, and use, which probably at first would mean a separate repo.
New Relic folks, got anything to say about that? Want to jump in?
I'd like to see it live somewhere where it's very clear that it's the sort of officially supported project. I like the idea of having it, being able to kind of run on its own release cadence. I am a little bit curious, how it would fit in with the idea of a management process or a sidecar, and what the division of responsibilities are there. But yeah, the main thing for us is that it's it's clear that's the official choice. It's easy to build and to extend, and that we can contribute back upstream easily in terms of licensing.
Yeah, I mean that's an excellent question. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, it's a lot of open questions. Ones that I were kind of expecting, but yeah, there's some good points that are being brought up here. Very good points. Okay, we're a little over, a little bit, but that's fine. Not like we're going anywhere, right? I think I'm just going to stay at home tonight. So I know these jokes are not getting old, are they? Yeah, they are. If there's anything else pressing, going once, going twice. Okay, let's call it a meeting. Thank you everyone for showing up and participating. I'm recording this, so I will post both of those in tandem tomorrow. And then I'll have some better notes around that as well. I think the next things that you can expect, once the notes are together and the recording's up, I'll put that on the dev list and probably tweet it as well. I don't know how you found this, but there it is. And we'll hopefully have some artifacts to work from, like CEP, so we can put some comments together, start working on that. And, PMC can help with some structure around that. But then I heard more of this kind of meeting is awesome, so I'm all for it, sure. So those are the kind of things we can look forward to. So thank you very much for everybody. And
thanks for organizing.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick.
Yeah,
thanks, Patrick.
Thanks.
Great stuff.
Stay safe.
Thanks all.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.